Aria Holden had a gift for noticing things that other people walked right past. She noticed the way the third elevator button in Hale Innovations Tower always stuck slightly before clicking. She noticed how the coffee machine in the break room hummed in a different pitch on Mondays. And she noticed with a sharpness that both thrilled and terrified her. Every single thing about Donovan Hale. She was sitting in the Monday morning strategy meeting. Her tablet propped on the glass table, her fingers ready to take notes. Around her, 8 senior executives in tailored suits were preparing their quarterly presentations. At the head of the room stood Donovan, 38 years old, founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, a man whose face regularly appeared on the covers of business magazines. He wore a dark charcoal suit that morning, no tie, top button open just slightly. The way he always dressed when he considered the meeting informal enough to breathe. Aria was 27, an executive assistant, invisible by design. She was there to document, schedule, and anticipate. She was very good at all three. But her mind, the part nobody at this company ever saw, was doing something else entirely. She was cataloging him the way. Donovan set both palms flat on the conference table when he was preparing to say something important. The faint line between his brows that appeared when a number disappointed him, the particular stillness he held in his shoulders when he was choosing his words carefully, a controlled patience that most people mistook for coldness. Aria had never mistaken it for anything but intensity. She had been doing this for 2 years, watching and remembering and keeping every observation tucked inside a part of herself that she protected fiercely, like keeping a candle lit inside a closed fist. And then every night, she went home and wrote. Her story was called Under His Shadow. And she posted it on a reading platform under the pen name Rosing. It followed a fictional woman named Nell who worked as an assistant for a powerful, solitary CEO named Griffin Steele. Griffin was tall with dark hair and gray eyes so sharp they felt like a physical thing when they landed on you. He ran a technology company with a quiet ruthlessness that everyone around him respected and slightly feared. He was a man who had everything except the one thing he did not even know he was missing. Aria had started writing it as a joke, a private release valve for the absurdity of having genuine feelings for a man who probably did not know her favorite color or her last name before checking his own files. She had not expected anyone to read it. She had certainly not expected 5 million people to read it, but that was the number blinking at her from her phone screen on that Monday morning as Donovan discussed fourth quarter projections from 12 feet away. 5,200,000 reads. 47,000 comments in the last chapter alone. Rosink was trending on 4 different platforms. Aria minimized the app and focused on the meeting. After the session ended, she returned to her desk outside Donovan's office. Answered 11 emails, confirmed 3 meetings, and organized a lunch reservation he had forgotten about. She did all of it efficiently, professionally, without letting her mind wander anywhere it should not go. This was the discipline she had built over 2 years. The wall between the woman who worked here and the woman who wrote by noon. The wall had a crack in it. She was eating lunch in the glass-walled break room with Renata, her closest friend in the building and the only person at Hale Innovations who made Aria feel like she could fully exhale. Renata worked in marketing, had a laugh that could fill a parking garage, and consumed romance novels the way some people consumed oxygen. "You have to read this," Renata said, sliding her phone across the table without looking up from her salad. "I found it last night and I could not stop. I read until 3 in the morning like an absolute maniac." Aria looked at the screen without touching the phone. The story title made her stomach drop so fast she felt it in her knees, Under His Shadow. "It is incredible," Renata said. "This author, Rosink, writes Griffin like he is a real person. Every detail feels lived in. You can tell she actually knows what it is like to work close to someone powerful. The tension is insane." Aria picked up her fork and very carefully put a piece of lettuce in her mouth. "Sounds interesting. Interesting. Aria, this man is perfect. Listen to this." Renata took the phone back and started reading aloud. Griffin set both hands flat against the conference table, and the room went quiet without him asking. He had that ability, the power to make silence feel like a decision rather than an absence. His eyes moved across the room with the precision of someone who had long ago stopped tolerating things that did not earn his attention. Across the table, Aria chewed her lettuce with extreme focus. Renata looked up with wide eyes. Does that not remind you of someone in this building? Lots of executives are like that. Aria. Renata leaned forward and dropped her voice. Griffin Steele has gray eyes, dark hair, a small scar near his left eyebrow, and a habit of going completely still right before he makes a major decision. He keeps a specific brand of single malt whiskey in his office because board meetings drain him. He taps the table in a 3-beat rhythm when he is impatient. She paused. That is Donovan Hale. That is our boss. That is an eerily specific description of our actual boss. Aria felt the temperature in the room change. It is fiction, she said. People write powerful CEOs all the time. It is a whole category, with a scar on the left eyebrow. Coincidence? Renata narrowed her eyes, but let it go, returning to her salad and her phone. Well, whoever wrote it clearly has a thing for someone very much like our billionaire upstairs. Because the feelings in the story are not fiction. You can feel them. That afternoon, the story appeared in the company group chat. Someone had shared a link with the caption, "Does this Griffin guy remind anyone else of someone we know?" The responses came fast and enthusiastic. A flood of laughing emojis and question marks in one. Bold reply from someone in finance. That simply said, that is 100%. Mr. Hale. Aria sat at her desk and watched the notifications stack up on her personal phone while simultaneously answering work emails on her work computer. She was in two worlds at once, and both of them were collapsing. By 4 in the afternoon she had convinced herself that Donovan would never see it. He did not use the company group chat. He barely used his own phone for anything personal. He had Preston, his assistant, filter everything. She was safe. At 5:45, Preston appeared at her desk with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Something between sympathy and apology. He wants to see you, Preston said quietly. After everyone leaves, Aria looked up from her screen. About what? Preston glanced down the hallway toward the closed office door and then back at her. He did not answer. He did not need to. The office emptied slowly, the way offices always do when the day is finally releasing people back to their lives. Aria watched each person leave through her peripheral vision, her hands continuing to work, her body performing normalcy while the rest of her was very still and very cold. When the floor was quiet, she stood, smoothed the front of her blazer, and walked to the heavy wooden door. She knocked twice. Come in. Donovan was standing at the window. The city spread out below him in the last gray light of the afternoon, towers and traffic and the wide silver line of the river in the distance. He did not turn around when she entered. Close the door, Aria. She did. The click of the latch sounded final in the quiet room. He turned then. His face was unreadable, which was not unusual, but his eyes, those precise, searching eyes, were fixed on her with an attention that was different from anything she had experienced in 2 years of working 3 feet from him. He picked up his phone from the desk, turned the screen toward her, and said 4 words that rearranged the entire architecture of her life. You are Rose Inc. It was not a question. Aria opened her mouth. Nothing came. The 2 years of careful walls, the discipline, the distance, the fiction that was never quite fiction enough, all of it compressed into a single silent second. He looked at her steadily. Waiting, the phone still turned toward her, the story title glowing on the screen between them. I can explain, she finally said, her voice smaller than she had ever heard it. I know you can, Donovan replied, and there was something in his tone that she could not name yet, something that was not anger, and that not anger was somehow more terrifying than fury would have been. He set the phone face down on the desk and said, I've been reading since Thursday. Aria stood very still in the center of the office. The city outside the window had gone dark while they faced each other across that expensive desk, and the room felt smaller than it ever had during any meeting or briefing or routine afternoon. It felt like the walls had quietly moved inward while she was not paying attention. Since Thursday, she repeated slowly. Every chapter, Donovan said, He moved away from the window and settled into the chair behind his desk, not with the formal authority he usually carried in that seat, but with something more deliberate, more considered. He folded his hands on the desk and looked at her the way she had only ever seen him look at contracts that required his full concentration. I finished the last posted chapter at 2 in the morning on Saturday. Then I went back and read it again. Aria pressed her lips together. You read it twice? Read the first 11 chapters 3 times. He paused. There is a scene in chapter 7 where Griffin is standing in his office after a failed acquisition, and he is not angry. He is just quiet, and Nell watches him from the doorway and understands that the quiet is its own kind of grief. Nobody has ever written anything about me that felt true. That chapter felt true. The confession landed on her chest like something warm and heavy. She had written that chapter in 40 minutes on a Tuesday night after watching Donovan stand alone in the conference room long after everyone had gone, looking at the city the way a person looks at something they have already lost. How did you find out it was me? She asked. The whiskey is a specific label. It is not available in the United States through normal retail channels. I have it imported. Preston knows about it, and my housekeeper knows about it. Neither of them writes romance fiction. He tilted his head slightly. And then there was the chapter where Griffin drives to the office at 5 in the morning the day before a board presentation and sits in the parking garage for 20 minutes before going inside. I have never told anyone that I do that. I did not know anyone had noticed. Aria felt the heat move up the back of her neck. I stayed late that night. I saw your car arrive through the lobby window. You noticed the time. I notice everything about you. The words came out before she could organize them into something safer. She heard them land in the quiet office and felt her whole body brace. I know that is not something I should say. I know this is not appropriate. I know you are my employer and that I have been writing about you for 2 years without your knowledge, and I understand completely if you want me to resign. I would understand that. I am prepared for that. Donovan was quiet for a long moment. He looked at her with that particular stillness she had described in chapter 3, the one that readers had flooded with comments saying Griffin was the most compelling fictional man they had encountered in years. In reality, it was simply how Donovan Hale thought before he spoke. He gave words the respect of considering them first. Sit down, Aria. She sat in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where she had taken notes 1,000 times, and waited. I am not going to ask you to resign, he said, and I am not angry. I spent the first night expecting to become angry, and it did not happen. What happened instead was something I have not felt in a long time. He paused again. I felt seen. Not as the company. Not as the revenue figures or the Forbes profile or the thing my mother built her expectations around. The person in that story is someone who gets tired and lonely and occasionally sits in parking garages because the silence is the only place where nothing is required of him. He looked directly at her. That is me. You wrote me. I did, Aria admitted quietly. I did not mean for anyone to read it. And then people did. And I told myself that the details were changed enough. I gave him different eyes, a different company name. I thought it was enough. The scar gave it away. Half my board has never noticed that scar. You put it in chapter 2? I noticed it your first week, she said. You were reading something and the light from the window hit your face and I saw it. And I thought it was the most specific thing about you, like something only a real person would have. Donovan looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not dramatically. He was not a dramatic man. But it shifted the way light shifts when a cloud moves. A change that altered the whole quality of what was visible. How long have you felt this way? He asked. Aria had rehearsed 100 versions of a denial for this question. Constructed over 2 years of careful mornings and disciplined afternoons, every version dissolved. Since the 3rd month, she said. You asked me to stay late to help prepare a presentation for the Singapore investors, and we worked until midnight, and you ordered Thai food, and you asked me what I wanted instead of just ordering, and I thought, this man is actually paying attention to me as a person. And something shifted that I could not shift back, and Donovan was quiet again. Then he said, I remember that night. You do? You've got the green curry, and you apologized for the smell. And I told you not to apologize for eating actual food during a 12-hour workday." He paused. "You laughed. It was the first time I heard you laugh, and I remember thinking that you had kept it hidden until then, which made me curious about what else you were keeping hidden." Aria stared at him. "You were curious about me? I have been curious about you for almost 2 years. I am careful about those things. I am your employer, and that line matters to me. But I would be dishonest if I told you I was indifferent." He stood and moved around the desk. And Aria stood too, because sitting while he was standing felt suddenly impossible. He stopped a few feet from her. "I invited you to dinner at my home on Saturday. That is something I want to do if you are willing. Not as a work conversation. As a real one." Aria breathed in slowly. "Are you sure about this? I read your story twice and felt it both times. I am sure." The corner of his mouth moved in the way she had described in Chapter 5. Not quite a smile, the suggestion of one. The implication that somewhere inside this controlled man there was warmth waiting to be claimed. "Besides," he added, "I want to know how Chapter 18 ends. You stopped posting." Aria laughed before she could stop herself. It broke the tension the way a window breaks when the pressure inside is finally too much. A clean, sudden release. "I could not write after people started noticing the similarities. I was afraid to add anything new." "Write it," Donovan said. "Whatever comes next." On Saturday evening, Aria stood in the marble lobby of the tallest residential tower in the city and gave her name to a security guard, who checked a list and smiled and sent her to the private elevator. She had changed outfits 4 times and settled on a deep burgundy dress that was not trying to. Hard, but was not pretending either. Her hair was down. She wore small gold earrings that her mother had given her. She looked like herself, which felt like the bravest choice. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse hall, and Donovan was there waiting. He wore dark jeans and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow and no watch. And she had never seen him without the watch. He looked younger. He looked like a person. "He came," he said, and there was genuine relief in it. "You thought I might not? I thought you might reconsider and decide this was complicated." "Ow. It is complicated," Aria said. "I came anyway." He smiled then. The full one, the rare one she had described in Chapter 8 as the thing that made Nell realize she was in serious trouble. In person, it was worse. It was entirely disarming, and it landed on her like sunlight through glass. Warm and direct and impossible to look away from. Dinner was salmon and roasted vegetables and a risotto that he made himself, which she could not fully process as a real thing that was happening. She stood in his kitchen watching a billionaire stir a pan with the focused attention he gave to everything and thought, "I have been writing this man for 2 years, and he is still surprising me." They ate at a table near the oscillating windows, with the city lights spread out below them, like something deliberately beautiful. They talked the way people talk when they have been waiting a long time to say real things to each other. He told her about his father, who had built the first version of the company and died before the real success arrived, and how the success felt complicated because of that absence. He told her about the loneliness of being at the top of something enormous and not trusting that anyone who climbed toward you wanted you and not the view. Aria told him about growing up in a small Ohio town where everyone knew. Everyone, and she had spent her entire childhood feeling like she was built for a different story, about how writing had always been the place where she felt most herself, most real. About how she had arrived in the city at 24 with a business degree she respected and a creative hunger she did not yet know what to do with. Under his shadow, Donovan said, "That title was not meant to be ominous," Aria said. "It was meant to be about shelter, being close enough to someone to live in their shade." He looked at her steadily. "That is a very specific kind of longing," yes, she said quietly. "It is." Enormous and glittering around them, and they stood close to each other at the rail in the kind of silence that is its own conversation. Aria could feel the warmth of him beside her, the solidity of his presence, and she thought about all the evenings she had translated exactly this, feeling into sentences for 5 million strangers to read. "Can I tell you something?" He said, "Yes. There is a version of my life where I am very good at my work and very poor at everything else. That version felt like the only one available for a long time. He turned toward her slightly. Reading your story did not make me feel exposed the way I expected it to. It made me feel like there might be a different version. Aria turned to face him fully. The city blazed behind his shoulders. There is, she said simply. He reached up and touched her face with one hand. A careful gesture, full of the deliberateness that was native to him. And she tilted toward it like something that had been waiting for warmth. When he kissed her, it was unhurried and certain, and she felt the whole disciplined wall of 2 years come down so quietly that it barely made a sound. They stayed on the terrace for a long time after that, talking and not talking, her hand in his. The city holding still around them like a backdrop waiting to be written, what neither of them knew. Standing on that terrace with everything new between them. Was that 4 floors below, in a black town car with tinted windows? A woman named Gloria Hale was looking up at the lit penthouse windows with a very different expression from the one her son was wearing, and she had already made. Several phone calls Monday arrived the way trouble always does, quietly and without warning. Dressed in something ordinary, Aria walked into Hale Innovation's tower at 8:15 carrying 2 coffees, the same way she had walked in every morning for 2 years. She wore a navy blazer and her hair was pinned back, and nothing about her appearance announced that her entire life had reorganized itself over a weekend. She was professional. She was composed. She was also floating approximately 3 inches above the floor, and she was fairly certain only Renata would notice. Renata noticed before Aria had even set her bag down. Something happened, Renata said. Appearing at the edge of Aria's desk with the speed of someone who had been watching the elevator. Your face is doing a thing. My face is doing nothing. Your face is doing the thing it does when you finish a really good chapter. Except you are at work and not at your laptop. So something happened in real life. Renata pulled up a chair and sat without being invited. Tell me everything. There is nothing to tell. Aria rose Holden. I am fine, Renata. I am just in a good mood. Renata looked at her for a long, searching moment, and then slowly turned to look down the hallway, toward the closed door of Donovan's office. She turned back. Her eyes were very wide. Absolutely not, she whispered. Go to work, Aria said without looking up from her screen. Renata stood slowly, still staring. I need you to know that I support you completely, and also that I am going to need details at some point, or I will not survive this. She walked away in a daze. Morning passed with the careful formality that Donovan and Aria had silently agreed upon. He sent her 3 work emails that were completely professional. She responded to all 3 in kind. When he passed her desk at 10 o'clock to collect documents for a board preparation meeting, he said good morning the same way he always had, and there. Eyes met for exactly 1 second longer than usual, and that 1 second contained an entire conversation that nobody else in the building could have read. Aria went back to her screen, feeling warm from the inside out. By Tuesday afternoon, the warmth had company. Uneasy company. Preston came to her desk at 4 with an expression she was beginning to recognize as his diplomatic face, the one he wore when delivering information he personally wished he did not have. Mrs. Hale is coming in tomorrow morning, he said. She requested a full board briefing and a private meeting with her son. Aria kept her face neutral. I will block the calendar. She also requested a review of all executive support staffing as part of a broader organizational efficiency assessment. Preston paused. Her words, not mine. Aria looked up then. Organizational efficiency assessment, her words Preston repeated. And the apology in his eyes said everything the words were carefully not saying. Gloria. Halle was 61 years old and had been on the board of Halle Innovations since the company's 2nd year of existence. When her late husband's failing health had transferred influence to her hands like water finding a new channel. She was not the founder and she was not the CEO, and she had spent a decade making certain that every person in the building understood she did not need either title to run things. She wore white exclusively, spoke in complete measured sentences that never wasted a word, and regarded the people around her, son with the evaluating attention of someone perpetually conducting an audit. She arrived Wednesday at 9 sharp. and Aria felt the shift in the building's atmosphere, the way you feel, weather changing before it arrives. Gloria walked past Aria's the desk with a glance that lasted less than 2 seconds and contained more information than most people communicated in a paragraph. She took in Aria's desk, her posture, her face, and the coffee on the corner of the desk that had 2 cups instead of 1, and she filed all of it. Somewhere behind her composed expression, the private meeting between mother and son lasted 90 minutes. Aria could not hear anything through the heavy office door, but she watched Preston's face during the meeting, and his face told her it was not going well. When Gloria emerged, she stopped at Aria's desk. She did not sit. She looked down at Aria with the particular patience of someone who has decided the outcome of a conversation before it begins. "You are very efficient," Gloria said. "Donovan speaks highly of your work. Thank you, Mrs. Hale. I want you to understand something." Her voice was pleasant in the way that certain cold things are pleasant, clean, and precise. "My son has built something extraordinary. Everything around him must serve that mission. Distractions, regardless of how they present themselves, are a liability at this level." She held Aria's gaze for a moment. "I am sure you understand." Aria held her expression steady. "Of course." Gloria smiled once, briefly, and left. That evening, Donovan texted her 3 words. She handled it. Aria stared at the message for a long time. She was not sure if the "it" referred to Gloria or to the 2 of them, or to some version of the situation that Donovan believed was now contained. She typed back a single "okay" and put her phone face down on her kitchen table and sat very still. She opened her laptop and looked at the last chapter of Under His Shadow, the one she had been unable to finish. The cursor blinked in the white space where the ending was supposed to be. She closed the laptop without writing a word. The following week moved like water over stone, slow and wearing. Gloria's organizational efficiency assessment produced a memo suggesting the restructuring of executive support roles. The memo, written in the clean, bloodless language of corporate administration, recommended that executive assistants be rotated across departments every 18 months to ensure fresh perspective and reduce the risk of siloed relationships. It was elegant. It was reasonable. It would remove Aria from Donovan's floor entirely. Renata read the memo over Aria's shoulder and said quietly, "That woman did this in 5 business days. That is genuinely impressive in a terrifying way." Aria said nothing. That Thursday, she typed a resignation letter. It took her 12 minutes. She read it twice and it was good. It was professional and gracious and said nothing that was not true. She saved it to her desktop and stared at it. She had come to this city at 24 looking for a bigger story. She had found one. She had lived inside one. She had written one that 5 million people loved. And now she was sitting at her desk constructing the part, where she quietly disappeared to make things easier for everyone involved. She thought about Chapter 7, the one Donovan had read 3 times. The one where Nell watches Griffin, standing alone after a loss, and understands that real strength is not the absence of feeling but the willingness to keep standing. In the presence of it, Aria closed the resignation letter without sending it. She was still at her desk at 6:15 when everyone else had gone and the floor had gone quiet. And the office door opened without a knock because Donovan had walked out of his own office and was standing in front of her desk looking like a man who had spent the last week making a decision. "Owe you an apology," he said. Aria leaned back in her chair and looked at him. "For what specifically?" "For 3 words in a text message that made it sound like you were a situation to be managed." He set both hands flat on her desk, which was the gesture she had described in Chapter 2 as the one that meant he was about to say the most important thing in the room. "You are not a situation, and I am done conducting myself like you might be one. Your mother is on the board," Aria said carefully. "She has real influence, and she is not wrong that relationships like this create complications." "She is not wrong about the complications," Donovan agreed. "She is wrong about the conclusion." He straightened. "There is a full board meeting tomorrow morning. I want you there. Aria frowned. I attend board meetings to take minutes. That is administrative. Tomorrow, you are attending as something else, he said. Trust me. She looked at him for a long moment. The city was going dark outside the windows behind him. She had written this man in 100 scenes, and in none of them had she written him looking quite like this. Open and certain, and slightly undone in the best way. Like someone who had finally stopped performing composure and was simply being it. All right, she said. The boardroom the next morning held 12 people around a long table, and every one of them was polished and powerful and projecting confidence the way people do when the room they are sitting in is made of their own ambitions. Gloria sat at the far end in white, composed and watchful. Preston stood near the wall. Aria sat in her usual chair with her tablet and her professional. Neutrality fully assembled. Donovan stood at the head of the room. He opened the meeting with the quarterly overview and moved through 3 agenda items with a focused efficiency that had made him one of the most respected people in the industry. The board was engaged. Numbers were good. Everything was proceeding with the comfortable momentum of a meeting that expected to end cleanly. Then Donovan set down his notes. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and took out his phone. He opened something on the screen and looked at it for a moment, then looked at the room. I want to read something, he said. Gloria's eyes moved to him with precise attention. It is from a story written by someone in this company, he continued, and his voice was calm and even and filled the room without effort. The story is called Under His Shadow. Some of you may have seen it discussed. It has 5 million readers. I want to read one paragraph. He looked down at the screen. Griffin stood at the window after the board had gone and the room had finished being a performance and became a room again. He was tired in the way that has nothing to do with sleep. He was tired of being a projection, a figure, a symbol of something that other people needed him to represent. He wanted to be a person. He wanted someone to see the person. He had almost stopped believing that was possible. The room was very quiet. Donovan put his phone down and looked at his mother first, then at the board, then at Aria. That was written about me, he said simply. With more accuracy and more care than anything written about me by any journalist, analyst, or biographer. It was written by Aria Holden, who has been my executive assistant for 2 years and who sees this company. And the people in it with more clarity than most of the people in this room. He paused. I am telling you this because I am in a relationship with her and I am not conducting it in secret. And I am not ending it because it is inconvenient. And I am not restructuring the executive support department to create a distance that would make anyone more comfortable. Aria will be transitioning into a senior operations role that reflects her actual capabilities, not her current title. Gloria's face had not moved. Donovan, she said. Mother, he replied, and his voice was kind and final in equal measure. I have run this company well. I will continue to run it well. And I am going to do it as a full person, which includes this. He looked at Aria across the table. I am done hiding things that do not deserve to be hidden. The room stayed quiet for another breath. Then the board member at Donovan's right, a woman named Suzanne who had been on the board for 8 years and said very little in meetings but missed nothing, tapped her pen once on the table and said, The numbers are strong, the vision is clear, and the senior operations appointment sounds overdue. Can we move to item 4? The meeting continued. Afterward, in the hallway outside the boardroom, Renata appeared from nowhere, grabbed Aria's arm, and said in a strangled whisper, he read from the book. In the boardroom, Aria. He read from your book. Aria was still processing it herself. I know. I am going to need to sit down. Me too. Gloria stopped beside them in the hallway. Renata went very still. Gloria looked at Aria for a long moment, with an expression that was different from Wednesday's audit. Still composed, still careful, but something in it had shifted by a degree that mattered. He has never defended anything that was not the company, Gloria said quietly. In 38 years, I've never seen him defend a person. She held Aria's gaze. Do not waste that. Then she walked to the elevator and was gone. 3 months later, a literary agency in New York sent Aria an email asking if Rose Inc. was interested in discussing representation. The story had crossed 6 million reads. A publisher wanted to talk about a book deal. Aria read the email sitting at her desk, now on a different floor, with a different title and a window of her own. And she laughed quietly and sent Donovan a text that said, "Someone wants to publish Griffin Steel." His response came in under a minute. "Tell them he is unavailable. He is already taken." She smiled at her phone and then opened her laptop and went back to the final chapter she had been writing for 3 weeks, one she had not been able to finish for 2 years. The cursor sat in the white space at the end of everything that had come before. She knew now how it ended. She had been living it. She wrote the last page in one sitting. And when she finished, she sat back and read it through once. And it was true, the way the best things she had ever written were true. Not because they were perfect, but because they came from somewhere real, and they meant what they said. She posted it that evening from the couch in Donovan's penthouse with her feet tucked under her and his hand resting at the back of her neck the way it did when he was reading beside her and not quite paying attention to his own book. The notification count started, climbing before she had even set her phone down. The last line of the final chapter read, "She had spent 2 years writing about the life she wanted, and then one day, without planning it, she simply started living it instead. And the living was better than anything she had imagined. Because it was real, and it was his, and it was hers. And it did not need an ending, because it was not that kind of story." Donovan read it over her shoulder and said nothing for a moment. Then he pressed his lips to her temple and said, "That is the truest sentence you have ever written." Aria closed the app and set her phone on the coffee table and turned toward him on the couch. The city spread out in lights beyond the window, the night soft and unhurried around them. "I think so too," she said, and for the first time in 2 years, she was not writing about any of it. She was simply inside it, where she had always belonged.